okay.
Yeah.
You look amazing. I love this.
I don't think so. Should we just...
Yeah.
She, hopefully she'll come up in a second. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just going to take my water over there.
We'll go ahead.
Just go and stand up there.
Yeah. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Brighton. So it's my pleasure to hand over now to the President of the Infection Prevention Society, Dr. Jude Robinson, to officially open the conference.
Welcome, guests, colleagues and friends. It is my great honour and pleasure to welcome you to IP 2025. I must confess, I count down to the IPS conference the way most people count down to Christmas. And this morning, I woke up with that same sense of anticipation, that excitement in my tummy, because over the next couple of days, we are going to experience something very, very special. So this conference is more than just a programme of sessions. It's a gathering of minds and hearts, all united by a shared commitment to one of the critical pillars of healthcare, which is infection prevention and control. We have the opportunity to exchange ideas, spark innovation, strengthen the global community that underpins our vital work. I'd like to start today by suggesting some very important thank yous. So firstly, I would like to thank our IPS Scientific Programme Committee, led by the fabulous Fiona Baker. And I can't see where she is. There she is. Come on up. And you can see on the screen here all of our other esteemed SPC members who together have brought you a truly phenomenal programme for us. So can we just give everybody a round of applause? Thank you, Fiona. Next, I want to recognise our wonderful FitWise colleagues. A special shout out to Elaine McCowan and Katie Hill for their professionalism and dedication, having brought prestige conference organisation to life, ensuring that everything runs smoothly for us today. And a heartfelt thank you also goes to our staff team, Sarah, Charlene, Gina, Alex, Lynn and Katie, who worked hand in hand with both the SPC and FitWise to make all of this possible. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge and thank you what I like to call the royalty of our conference, and that's our corporate partners. Without their support, this event just simply wouldn't be able to go ahead. You can see some of their names and logos on the display here behind me. And a special thank you to our platinum sponsor Gamma and our gold sponsor Talk. I encourage you to go and take the time to visit our exhibition through the hall just over the way. And don't forget to book onto the mystery tours that are running throughout the 2 days. It's a fantastic way to engage with our partners and learn even more about innovation. So to all of our organisers, partners and speakers and volunteers, just a massive thank you. This conference is what it is because of you. So I'd like to now just give you a few moments to give you an update on our society, what we've been working on, the progress that we've made, and the exciting developments that lay ahead. So the Infection Prevention Society is a charity with a simple but powerful vision to create a world where no one is harmed by preventable infection. Our history is important to us. So back in 1970, the Infection Control Nurses Association was formed. And in 2007, recognising the vital contribution of all healthcare professionals, we rebranded and became the IPS that we know today. Since then, we've grown into a thriving community of over 2,100 members, with 14 branches across the UK and Ireland, 5 business groups and 9 special interest groups. Last year marked a huge leap forward in our growth with the establishment of our dedicated staff team to support our incredible volunteers. Alex, our Chief Exec, launched an ambitious strategy, and I'm really proud to share just some of those achievements that we've seen this year. We've had a brand new website and membership system to better serve our community. We have a stronger member voice through the creation of a clinical leadership and engagement committee. We have a fabulous corporate partnership framework that was led by Phil Norval and his corporate advisory team. We've had an addition of 2 special interest groups. We've had the veterinary SIG and an early careers SIG, as well as our brand new dental network. And by the end of the year, we'll be adding 2 more SIGs, built environment and leadership. We also have a comprehensive equality, diversity, inclusion strategy, which has been championed by Lorraine Williams and Alex Rice. So lots of activity going off. And of course, a shout out to Kerry Holden, a wonderful Vice President. So Kerry and I have been a very busy duo, haven't we, Kerry? Building those collaborative opportunities across a wide range of disciplines, from estates through to occupational health, and also with international societies. And we thank those affiliated societies that have come from abroad to be with us as well. And we've also had the pleasure of meeting with our members and branches, which has been a true highlight for us this year. Kerry and I this year launched Clinical Conversations. These are short recordings where we speak directly to you about hot topics in infection prevention and control. It's a way of staying connected, sharing insight and sparking discussion. And just a little spoiler, we may even be recording over the conference. So keep an eye out, you might just feature. Our journal has also seen a real increase in interest this year, thanks to our partnerships to host journal clubs. This has been a fantastic way to engage more deeply with our latest publications, ensuring that research is not just read, but it's discussed, it's debated, and it's applied in practice. So that's just a flavour of the activity that we've been working on, the progress that we've made together, and it's a reminder of the incredible breadth of work happening across our society, and all of it is driven by the passion, commitment and collaboration of our members, staff and volunteers. So when I first began my presidency last year, our Chair of Trustees, Steve Hams, asked me a very important question. He said, "What do you want your presidency to look like?" My answer is simple. I want this society to become something that every IPC professional cannot live without. That vision is what drives me every single day. My passion is to listen, to hear what's on your worry list, to hear what your challenges are and to try and understand them, and to make sure that the IPS is here to bring you the solutions that you need. To help us do that, we've made it as easy as ever for you to share your thoughts. Behind me here, you'll see a QR code. Please take a moment to scan it, bookmark it, and when you get the chance, maybe on your journey home or sometime next week, please complete it. Your voice is what shapes this society, and together we can make the IPS the organisation that fully supports you in every part of your IPC journey. It's wonderful, I'm going to put that back actually so you can scan it. It's wonderful to see such diversity among our delegates, and it truly reflects what a multidisciplinary speciality infection prevention truly is. Already, I can feel the incredible energy in the room, the power of global collaboration, innovation, shared learning that is going to unfold today and tomorrow. Together, we are not only sharing knowledge, but we're shaping the future of our field. This conference is more than just a series of sessions and keynotes. It's a space for critical reflection, fresh ideas, bold conversations, and most importantly, collective action. We will hear from leaders and frontline workers, from global experts to local champions. Together, we will share what works, confront what doesn't, and imagine what is possible. We've even got a special opportunity for you later. Dr. Mark Garvey will be handing the baton over to you, giving you the chance to choose which topic you'd like him to cover later on today. It's not every day you get to shape the content of a session, so please make sure that you use the conference app and please cast your vote and be part of that decision making. For me, infection prevention is not just science, it's humanity in action. So whether you're here to learn, to teach, to challenge ideas, or to find solutions, thank you. Thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for being here. So here's to IP 2025, being the most engaging, inspiring, supportive, and impactful conference that we've ever delivered, and I really hope you enjoy.
May we ask people to move forward, please? There are still seats here.
So, without further ado, I'm absolutely privileged to be able to chair this next session, which is our COTTRELL lecture. So, the COTTRELL lecture is named after Edith Cottrell, who was the first IPC nurse in the UK. And we've got the wonderful Neil Wigglesworth, who's going to come and talk to us. So, Neil has been working in IPC since 1995. Most recently, he was the Exec Director of IPC on the board of East Kent Hospitals, having been DIPSI at Guy's and Thomas's Trust previously. Neil is now a Senior Lecturer and Course Leader for the MSc for IPC at the University of West London, and also immediately past Chair of the International Federation of Infection Control. Member of the Antimicrobial Prescribing Resistance and Healthcare Associated Infection Advisory Committee, and previous President of the IPS. Will you please give Neil a warm welcome as he comes to the stage?
Two off-the-cuff comments. Can you hear me? So two entirely off-the-cuff comments before I start. I'm not sure I can follow Jude's speech. Wow. That was amazing, inspirational. And the other is nobody sits at the front except for the old people like me because we're deaf or blind. So come on, get to the front. Thank you. It is an absolute privilege to give this named talk today. It's an honour to do it for IPS. I have been, as Jude said, in IPC since 1995, and I literally the first week I started, I joined what was then ICNA, and I've been intimately involved in ICNA and then IPS ever since. Perhaps not so much in the last few years after being president, but certainly involved for a great many years. I would like very much to thank Jude and her colleagues and the leadership team of IPS, Fiona and her team in the Scientific Programme Committee for asking me to do this, giving me the privilege of doing this. In addition to that, I'd also like to thank Elaine at Fitwise for badgering me appropriately to get on with this and actually do the work to get ready for this. But in addition to thanking IPS and everybody here, and thank you all for coming and listening and getting out of bed to come and listen to this morning, I also would like to thank, and I can't name them because there are far too many, but I'd like to thank all the people who have helped me in my 30 years makes me sound very old, doesn't it? My 30 years in this career, in this wonderful career that we all share, and it is the best. It is absolutely the best job ever, and I'm still glad that I'm involved in it. But there are far too many to mention, whether they've been leaders or colleagues or teams, people that I've worked with, people who have given me advice. There's probably more than dozens of them. Many of them are in this room, and many of them I count as friends, and I'm very thankful to them all. So, this lecture, I had a conversation this morning, I won't name the person, a conversation with somebody who's been asked to give a similar keynote lecture in the future. The first thing we said was, when somebody asks you to give a prestigious lecture, you go, yes, thank you, I'd love to, that'd be wonderful. And then you think, what the hell am I going to talk about? Because they don't give you a topic, so you have to choose, which is unusual when you're speaking at a conference. And so I started off by, in a sense, by defining what I'm not. So many people who will give a keynote lecture will have been a career researcher typically, and they will have a strong theme of the work they've done over their careers, and they'll probably talk about that. I mean, Michael's done many things, but he's done a lot of work on behaviour change, and not surprisingly, when he gives a major speech, that will often be the theme that he comes back to, because he's done so much work on it. That's not been my work. I've been largely a practitioner. I've been a jobbing ICN, as it was back in the old days when I first started. A jobbing ICN, I've been a nurse consultant, I've been in many roles in IPC over the years, but I've largely been in practice. I've largely been doing what many of you do, working in an healthcare organisation, delivering IPC. So I decided I wouldn't try to be that person who comes here and presents loads of data or loads of research findings. I thought it would be, I've been lucky enough to be involved in some research, bits and pieces over the years and publications and things, but that's never been my defining sort of career. So I decided that I would try and give you some reflections on my career and the things I've done and the places I've been, I suppose. And also I've got some lessons. I've got some lessons that I feel I've learnt and that may help you. If I'm entirely honest, this is probably not aimed at and I'm trying not to look at anybody now, my senior colleagues. I'm not looking at anybody, I promise. It's probably not aimed so much at my senior colleagues, but many of you in the room will be earlier in your careers, still earlier on in your careers. It's probably more aimed at you. I'm hoping that what I've done and what I've seen and what I've learned might help you think about where you want to go, how you want to get there, and those sort of things. I've absolutely no idea what I'm going to do for time. There's no clock on here, is there? I'm sure Jude will shout at me when I'm run out of time. And it's going to be shamelessly not academic, okay, this talk. I have no declarations of interest. I think that's something we have to do these days, isn't it? My roles these days, I have two roles, really. Primarily, I'm a part-time university lecturer teaching the MSc at the University of West London. If anybody needs an MSc, the University of West London is fabulous. Please come and join us. Quick plug for the job, for the day job. And my only other formal role is, as Jude said, is a member of the unpronounceable ARPRI committee for the Department of Health England. But I may give that up soon, because I think they need young people. I have occasionally other outside interests in the specialty still, helping out with little projects and things, but that's my only formal role. So I have absolutely no declarations at all with regard to that. So, as I said, slightly disingenuously, I've said 30 years. It's actually 29 years and 53 days. I started as an infection control nurse, and that was the title back then, on the 20th of November 1995 in Leeds. What was then the Leeds West Teaching Hospitals, I think it was before it became the whole of Leeds combined. If anybody's here from Leeds, shout out there. So it's almost 30 years ago. This picture is from an early sharp safety campaign that we did when I was in Leeds. A slightly less grey-haired looking young man of 30 there, compared to the rather greyer man of 60 that you see in front of you now. I put this picture up specifically because the lady in the middle, some of you may know, is Judy Hall, who sadly we lost last year, far too young. So I just put it up as a little tribute to Judy, who was a wonderful human being and one of the loveliest people you'll ever meet, literally. And the other one is Sharon Kelly, by the way, one of the very first people to specialise in dental infection prevention and control quite early on in her career in Leeds. And our other colleague, there were four of us, our other colleague's not on the picture, but she was Pia Kirkpatrick, if anybody knows Pia. She works in Scotland somewhere. I haven't seen her for years. And I'll come back to this, but the four of us all started in IPC or as ICNs on the same day, literally, and none of us had worked in IPS before. IPC. Get my teeth back in. None of us had worked in IPC before. We'd just come straight from clinical jobs, and all four of us were recruited and started on the same day, which is quite unusual back in 1995. And I'll come back to that when I talk about IPC back then in a minute. So, need my glasses. So, 1995 was a very long time ago, in many ways. Just some headlines from 1995. Some of you weren't even born, I guess, in the room, which is extraordinary to me. On my birthday in 1995, the 4th of July is my birthday. You can't forget that, it's easy to remember. They have all these parties in America and they don't like to embarrass me, so they call it something else. But on my birthday in 1995, John Major was re-elected as leader of the Conservative Party because he'd done a sort of back me or sack me thing at the time, and he got re-elected, although he lost the election 2 years later. But we're not at that conference, that one's in Liverpool, so that's the end of the politics today. Princess Diana gave her famous interview with the BBC where she admitted all her behaviours in her marriage. All that time ago, 2 years before she died, in 1997. This one struck me, actually. President Bill Clinton, who was the US president at the time, don't we wish that were the case now, he visited Northern Ireland, to visit Northern Ireland with regard to what were then called the Troubles. And if there's any Irish colleagues in here, I'm sure they'll feel very strongly. Because this was 3 years before the Good Friday Agreement, before I'll use the term very loosely, but the end of the Troubles in Northern Ireland. So it was a very long time ago, and many things have changed. Windows 95 was launched. Not surprisingly, there's a clue in the name. But interestingly, internet usage in the UK in 1995, 1.9% of the population were using the internet in 1995. So almost nobody had an internet connection in 1995. So you didn't just Google the answer to your IPC question in those days. There were no smartphones. This is 5 years before the Nokia 3310 was launched. Some people are going, what's a Nokia 3310? Ask your mother. So how did people in 1995 get the answers to the questions that they now Google? And I'm talking about IPC people. Well, they went to ICNA. They went to an ICNA, what was then called a regional group meeting. They were called regional groups, not branches in those days. They went to a regional group meeting and they asked their colleagues. And they rang up somebody in the next hospital and they asked their colleagues. And of course, we had books, we had journals, we had all the academic literature that we have now in many ways, but those networks were so important. You couldn't just Google the answer; it didn't exist. Guidelines came through the post when they came at all. There weren't many of them, to be fair, in those days. One of the authors of what there was is sitting in the room with us as well these days, and everybody hopefully had a paper copy of an infection control manual, which is what it was called in those days, on the shelf in the office, because there was very little in terms of IT in hospitals in those days. And some of you may remember, we had T-cards on the walls for surveillance. We had with patients' names and what bugger they had on what ward they were on a wall. That was our surveillance back in 1995. And a few other things quickly. I'm conscious I've run out of time if I'm not careful. 1995 was the year, for the UK people, 1995 was the year that they added the extra 1 to landline phone numbers, because they ran out of phone numbers. I mean, it wouldn't be an issue now, would it? Who uses landlines? Pubs were allowed to open in the afternoons for the first time ever. Or, sorry, Sunday afternoons for the first time ever. I didn't have to close at 2 o'clock or whatever it was. Any football fans in the room? This was the year of Eric Cantona's famous kung fu kick of one of his spectators, for which he was banned for 8 months from football and almost went sent to prison, but managed to appeal that sentence. And on a more sober note, the Bosnian War ended after the Srebrenica, I can't say that word, massacre in that year. Big films of the year: Batman Forever, GoldenEye, Casper and Apollo 13, the big movies of the year. And God, the musical taste was terrible. So the best-selling single of the year was Robson and Jerome and Unchained Melody. Wow. To contrast that, Oasis did release What's the Story, Morning Glory, which was the second best-selling album of the year after Robson and Jerome. Sorry. Okay, so 95 was a long time ago. IPC was a very different world. This screenshot is just a picture of a report that came out in 1997 or 1998, the House of Lords Science and Technology report on infection prevention and control, to which the ICNA gave evidence to this report in the House of Lords. It was one of the earliest examples of government interest in infection prevention and control. I'm looking at Carol, so hoping she won't correct me if that's a reasonable statement to make, because Carol was involved at the time in the Department of Health. But it was one of the earliest examples of government interest in IPC on a very high level. And I said that Leeds was very unusual at the time. So somebody in the senior leadership at Leeds hospitals decided to put in a business case for 4 infection control nurses. They had one person working in infection control at the time who was a non-nurse, a scientific person, and some medics, obviously. And they thought they'd put a business case in for 4 infection control nurses, thinking they'd get 2. In classic business case, thinking, we'll put for 4, we might get 2. But they got 4. So 4 of us all started. So we had 4 infection control nurses in what was a fairly large hospital group in Leeds in those days. And that was quite a contrast. I mean, I came from my clinical role, my last clinical role was in Barnsley, and you have to say it like that, Barnsley. Was in Barnsley, I can't say it any other way. And in that hospital, there was one. It was a reasonable sized district general hospital. I forget how many beds, but in those days there were more beds than there are now. It was a reasonable sized district general, and they had one infection control nurse, again, which was the title in those days. I don't think she's here, but one of the people who got me into this job, Denise Potter, as she was called then. She's not called that now, she's called Denise Gibson, but Denise Potter was one of the people that got me into IPC. And that was, that was typical. In those days, a typical size hospital might have one person doing IPC. Some of the bigger hospitals and bigger organisations had a handful more, maybe 2 or 3 sometimes, but it was a much smaller profession than it is now. And if you worked in community or mental health, probably none. Occasionally one, but probably none in those days. So it's changed a great deal, and for the better, absolutely in many ways. And the reason I put this report up was I was trying to find something to show you, which was with regard to what the guidance for infection prevention and control was in those days, and it was this. So only the, again, I'm not looking at you, but only the older people in the room are going to be nodding now and knowing what. It took me absolutely hours to find this picture, because I didn't keep my copy. I've lost my copy over all the years of moving from hospital to hospital and job to job. I lost my copy of this document. This was the guidance for hospital infection control in the UK back in and it was published in 1995, the year I started. A group which was the Department of Health and what was then the Public Health Laboratory Service, which is about 5 versions earlier of what is now UK HSA, UK Health Security Agency. It was called PHLS in those days, a long time ago. Lead author, I believe, was E. Mary Cook of PHLS. So we used to call it the Cook Report or the Green Report. Quite often it's meant to be green if that colour's not showing up. And there's a couple of interesting quotes in here, which I liked. One was this is from the quotes are from the House of Lords report rather than this, but it cites this guidance. And one of the quotes, it says, "In some respects, hospitals achieve the level of infection control for which they are willing or able to pay," which is probably still true to a certain extent. And interestingly, it quotes the ICNA giving evidence to the committee, saying that there was one ICN, infection control nurse, for every 700 beds in England at that time, or the UK at that time. So again, hopefully we've moved on a good deal since then. So 1995 was a long time ago, and a few things have happened since then. Some of them in the world of infectious diseases and global and local outbreaks. I'll pick a couple out here for those, again, back in 2002, 2003, there was the original version of SARS, you know, the much less improved model of SARS back in 2002, which was actually a horrible disease. It was mainly confined to, it originally originated in China, but was confined to certain countries in the world. Canada had a particular problem with this, but it was a similar disease, respiratory infection to the SARS we know and love, but was had a case fatality rate of over 10%. This was a very nasty, horrible, but thankfully it didn't spread around the entire globe. There was in 2009, I'm skipping through to 2009. Anybody remember swine flu? The pandemic that kind of wasn't. That was an interesting one because we'd been preparing for years, and in some people's cases decades, for the next pandemic. And when it came, it was a slightly strange one. We did an awful lot of preparation, an awful lot of work was done in infection prevention and control teams, the things you've all experienced in recent years, but all that training, all that preparation, all those drills, and it didn't really materialize into the sort of hugely affecting pandemic that we'd expected, I suppose it's fair to say. It was an unpleasant strain of flu that did some damage and caused some mortality in certain groups, but it wasn't the all-encompassing pandemic that we were expecting. And then there was MERS, don't go kissing a camel, essentially. Which again, what did we do? We prepared, we drilled, we set up PPE protocols. Did an enormous amount of work for something that really didn't materialise into very much in terms of impact on us. Forgive me, I'm speaking for the UK largely here, so I know there are non-UK colleagues in the room for whom these things may have had much larger impacts. But in the UK, we did a lot of preparation for not a lot of action, essentially, back in then. And I would say the same about the 2013, 2016 sort of Ebola period, when we had to do an enormous amount of preparation, an enormous amount of planning and protocol writing and training, and who remembers the running down to the ED for the suspected Ebola case every other day that was never an Ebola case. So again, of course, this was a horrible outbreak that caused massive mortality and morbidity in the parts of the world that were affected, and it was a terrible thing. But we did a lot of practice for not a lot happening. And of course, in the end, we had the mother and father of all of them, which was our friend COVID. I'm not going to dwell on COVID-19 much, because I think you've all heard enough about it in the recent years, and you're probably all sick to death of talking about it. But I mean, that was probably the defining IPC event and defining IPC experience of all our lifetimes, I hope. For those of you who've got many years to come, I hope it's the defining event you'll ever see, because we all know how that affected us. Patients, families, hospitals, IPC teams, healthcare workers. It was extraordinary. So a few things have happened in that respect. And of course, a few more things have happened I won't go through these in detail, but we've had all of the inexorable rises in specific antibiotic resistance mechanisms and problem organisms, whether it was the extraordinary rise of MRSA back in the 90s and the early 2000s, the extraordinary rise of C. diff in the UK, again, I'm talking about the UK, in C. diff, which closely followed that. The success story, one of the few great success stories of infection prevention and control in driving those figures down, although having said that, although you probably can't see it, the little graph on the end here is the most recent data for some of the reportable organisms in the UK, and I'm sure you all know, because you're still working in it, things seem to be on the rise again. Somewhat, the MRSAs and the C. diffs, our old friends, seem to be back on the rise again. And I'm just looking at the data as someone who doesn't practice now, so you may have different reflections on that in your everyday work, but they seem to be on the rise again. But we lived through things like mandatory reporting being established for these organisms, national targets, which I don't know if Martin Kiernan's in the room, but biggest fan in the world of the national targets and the health secretary at the time, putting those in place. alongside all those changes, the only other one I will mention specifically is the relatively recent rise of what is now called Candida zyma auris. Have I got that right? Thank you. One of the things you'll find if you have a career in infection prevention and control is they love to change the names. And they change them to something that's harder to say and hard to spell every single time. Every time. So Candida zyma auris is only the most recent example of a name change that makes it harder to say and harder to spell. So we've lived through enormous changes in terms of that. I'm grateful to John Otter and his colleagues for the commentary on where is CPE in the UK, which is from their blog, from IPC Reflections blog, which it gave me some pause for thought, because actually it said that actually CPE in the UK is still quite a small problem. Less than 1%, I think he said, of the isolates are still resistant overall. So that was interesting to me, because I've not read that sort of stuff for a while. So a lot of things have happened in infection, in microbiology, infection prevention and control. Jude mentioned that also in this period, ICNA became IPS. It was my privilege to be the last secretary of ICNA and therefore the first secretary of IPS back in those times. It was actually decided on in 2006 by the members' vote and implemented in 2007, as Jude said, here, because it was at Brighton. Conference back then was here in Brighton. Interestingly, so it's a kind of interesting anniversary of IPS to be back here in Brighton after all those years. Right. So my last comment on all the changes since 1995, before I go on to my lessons, is, remember I showed you the Cook report? That was pretty much the only guidance we had. That changed a bit. So I haven't even put on a fraction of all the documents and all the campaigns and all the things that have come out since 1995. There's not even a fraction of them. I haven't included the HBNs and the HTMs for those who work in the UK. I haven't included lots of organism-specific guidance. I haven't included all the systematic reviews and guidelines that have come out over the years. I haven't included anything about COVID. There's nothing about COVID on the screen. Deliberate omission, I think, because I'm sick of hearing about COVID. We've had, rightly or wrongly, a massive proliferance of guidance, of regulation and regulatory structures in the IPC, bureaucracy, I would argue, and much increased bureaucracy, certainly speaking from a UK perspective over those years. I mean, I haven't even included the laughingly called Board Assurance Framework. Speaking as an ex-executive, I'll describe it as such. Anyway, so that's a lot of changes in that time. Now, I've got another 15 minutes to give you my 7 lessons, and they're quite brief. So I've got 7 lessons from my career. Somebody once said this looks like Henry VIII, this picture. But there you go. When I was in Leeds from 1995 to 2006, working with Mark Wilcox. Some of you may know Mark. He was my boss at the time. I went to a seminar somewhere. It wasn't IPC. I went to some seminar. I was in York, I think. And there was a guy there who just finished his PhD. He was a psychiatric nurse. And me, I'd left school with 6 O-levels. I managed to get myself a degree while I was working in Leeds in IPC. But I wasn't an academic by any way, shape or form. And I literally came back to work and said, Mark, can I do a PhD? And he'd be like, I suppose so. I saw an opportunity. Over the years, I've done that many times. If you see an opportunity, just take it. Take it. Whatever it is. And if sometimes it means a sacrifice, sometimes it means doing something for free. You're not getting paid for this. I'm going to pick out Danelle, because Danelle's here and he spoke earlier. But Danelle's coming and speaking on my course at UWL. And he's doing that because it's an opportunity. It's an excitement. It's sort of if you don't ask, you don't get. And don't assume the answer will be no. If you want something and just try, ask the question. I just said, can I do a PhD? And literally Mark said, well, I suppose so. And we worked out a question, a proposal, got some funding, and I did it. And never looked back in terms of my career opportunities. After I left Leeds, I worked in Salford. I was a nurse consultant in Salford. I was privileged to be there right at the beginning of when quality improvement methodologies, the model for improvement was coming into the UK. It was a delight for me to be involved in that work, and when I went on to Wales, I carried on that work there, because Wales was an early adopter of quality improvement methodologies as well as Salford, so it was, again, more opportunities that came up and I took them. So when I left Wales in 2009, sorry, I went to Wales in 2006 and left in Salford, I'm talking rubbish, excuse me. When I left Salford in 2009, I took a change of direction. I went to be, some of you will work in public health settings, I went to be a public health trainee, the training to become a consultant in public health. I did it for 2 years, and I hated it. I hated it. After 2 years, I passed my exams. I'm a faculty member of the pub, and I got an MPH out of it. But I actually hated the work. I hated every minute of it. So I just thought, I'm leaving. I'm going to do. And that's when I went to Wales and took the IPC job that came up in Wales. But I literally hated it. And when I went to tell them I was leaving, they literally didn't understand. The faculty people in the local faculty. I'm leaving the training course. Sorry, you what? Nobody leaves. No, I'm leaving. And that was a difficult decision to make, but it was the wrong direction for me. I was hating it. I was hating every minute of the work. I used to characterize it that, and I'm sure that the problems of people with diabetes in the Ribble Valley are really important. I just don't care. And I just didn't care. And I need to go back to what I cared about, and what I cared about was infection prevention and control. And so I changed direction, and it's okay to make it, to go back and say, actually, that was a wrong step. Go back and do something different. And it's okay to do that. So my next lesson is steal and share at all times. The reason the picture's up here, originally I put the picture in the bottom corner, then I found the other one, which was what I was looking for originally. That's Professor Jackie Riley, who was Health Protection Scotland back in the day. She's now a university professor. Many of you will know Jackie, she's a great individual. There was this phrase she had back in the day, which was, she said, you need to have an abundance mentality. You need to be prepared to just share everything, and that's exactly what Health Protection Scotland in those days did. So they had a big resource. They had a lot of staff in their IPC resource in Health Protection Scotland back in the we're talking about now back in the early 2000s and late 2000s and something, what they call the noughties, over the right decade is. And they produced a lot of scientific evidence, a lot of guidance, a lot of materials. And I was working in Wales with Tracy, who's over there, Tracy Gouchy, who's over there, and others, Mike's here too, colleagues here too. And we didn't have that kind of resource. We didn't have that kind of, there was, in our national team, there were a couple of us. There was Tracy at the government. There was me and a few other colleagues in the national team. It was a small resource. So what did we do? We stole what they did, and we just used it, because why would you not? Steal it. Don't reinvent the wheel. So the Code of Practice for Prevention and Control of Healthcare-Associated Infections, that version, the original version, I'm not sure if it's changed or not in Wales. I'm not sure, because I'm not in Wales anymore. I wrote that, but I didn't write it. I copied and pasted it from the English one at the time. Literally, copy and paste from the English one. The model policies for infection prevention and control, which were the precursor of the National Infection Prevention and Control Manual, I stole from Scotland with permission, with their kind permission, because they were more than grateful to share. They were happy to share. They had that abundance mentality. So I'm very grateful to Jackie. And some of you might recognise a young Jenny Wilson there as well in this picture in the bottom corner. The reason I put this picture on is because next to Jenny is Jackie and Jenny's hero, Bob Halley, who they met at conference. I think it was in Harrogate. They were awestruck by the guy Bob Halley from the famous Scenic study back in the 1980s. So that's their hero, Bob Halley, on the right, and of course the prof on the left. You all know the prof. I'm not going to tell you who he is. How am I doing? Running out of time. So my next lesson is a simple one. Be prepared to be wrong and to change your mind. John Maynard Keynes, some of you may have heard of the great economist, John Maynard Keynes said, well, he didn't say it actually, but he's attributed to him. He supposedly said, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir? Which I think is a very good thing. And to be honest, this is about COVID. And so I came into COVID, like so many of us did, with an absolutely dogmatic belief in that there is contact, there is droplet, and there is airborne. and they are completely different things, and never the twain shall meet. And if it's droplet, it's 2 meters or 6 foot, and that's it, and not a single drop will go beyond it. And I was absolutely dogmatic about that, and God, was I wrong. You know, I'm not going to get into the whole airborne blah, blah, blah debate. That's not what I'm talking about here. Just that I was too dogmatically attached to what I'd been taught for the last 20 odd years, 30 years nearly at that point. I needed to relearn. We all had to relearn a great deal during that time. So when you're wrong, just get over it and move on, because sometimes you're just going to be wrong. Right, getting messy now. Lesson 5. Get a mentor, and then if you can, be a mentor. Pay that mentorship forward. This lady, one of the most important people in my career, this is Dame Eileen Sills. Some of you may know Dame Eileen. She was the chief nurse at Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital and my boss when I was the Dipsy there and deputy Dipsy there for some time. One of nurse in the UK, one of nursing's most important leaders and most inspiring and developed nursing extraordinarily in the UK. And she's just, I haven't got time to explain, but she's such an inspiring leader. She didn't teach me about IPC. She didn't know about IPC. She knew quite a bit about IPC, actually, but she wasn't an IPC specialist. She taught me about leadership. She taught me about how to be an inspiration, I'm not an inspiration, but how to work in that way. And latterly, when I became an executive at East Kent, she taught me how to operate at that level, how to work with a board, how to operate at the executive level. She just gave me too many things she gave me over the many years. That's actually, the picture actually that's a portrait of her that's been put up at St Thomas's. That's the first new portrait in that hall in St Thomas's for 100 years. That's how inspiring this woman has been for that organisation. She's not there now. So yeah, and if you can, having got a mentor, whomever that is, and for whatever reason, use them. Use them as much as you can. But then try and be one if you can. If you've got that capacity and that opportunity, and there's people who want your help and need your help, try and be that person too. And I hope I'm doing that for one or two people these days, trying to help them, support them. How am I doing? Oh, yeah, that's fine. Lesson 6 is volunteer. Absolutely volunteer. I have been, I think Jude listed some of them, but I have been the secretary of ICNA and IPS, president of IPS. I've been the editor of the journal, and I'm not maybe anti-clever. I volunteered for that's the point, is I volunteered for all these jobs that you don't get paid for them. My first thing I did was back when I was in the Yorkshire branch, Yorkshire Regional Group as it was then, I volunteered to join a group doing guidelines for enteral feeding, because I had an interest in enteral feeding IPC at the time. You volunteer. And why do you volunteer? Well, partly just because you do it for the joy, for the camaraderie, for the friendships you make. You do it for none of these are tangible benefits, but there absolutely are tangible benefits. It's good for your career. The networking, the contacts you make, the reputation you develop as someone that's willing to get stuck in and get involved is absolutely good for your career. I wouldn't have got where I am, where I've been, without the volunteering that I did, both with IPS and a little bit with IFIC, the International Federation of Infection Control, a much smaller organisation actually, although it sounds global and posh. It's quite small actually. But there is definitely, I can't promise you'll get to stand in front of the statue of Christ the Redeemer in Rio de Janeiro, but I did that partly because I was volunteering. That was an IFIC conference, wasn't it, Debbie? IFIC and Michael. Debbie and Michael were there. So I'm just looking at those two. I can't promise that. But, and the picture in the middle is me speaking to the Japanese Infection Control Nurses Association, their equivalent. I got to go speak to them about IPC in the UK, which was extraordinary, terrifying. Being translated into Japanese simultaneously while you speak is just extraordinary. So, volunteering is so good for your career. Just do it. Just take it on. And I've got one more. How am I doing for time, Jude? I'm all right. Okay. My last one is about if you find yourself in the privileged position of being in a leadership role, and it is an absolute privilege to be in a leadership role, then this is my tip for you. And some of you, I make no apologies for the fact that some of you have seen this before, because I've done some talks here and elsewhere about the notion of compassionate leadership and how I strongly believe in that's the most important aspect of a leadership role is that of compassionate leadership. This poster comes from the Harvard Business School. It's quite old. I had it for a few years. This literally was on my wall in my office in my last 2 or 3 jobs. I put this on my wall and I looked at it every day because to me this was the most important way. If you have the privilege of leadership, this is the most important thing you can do. It says be kind, in a sense, but I'm actually going to read it, if you don't mind. It says, connect then lead. There are 2 ways we judge others. Can I trust this person, which is about their warmth, and can I respect this person, which is about their competence? And it says leaders need both. Leaders who project strength before warmth run the risk of eliciting fear. The way to influence is to begin with warmth or kindness. It's much the same thing. Warmth facilitates trust, communication, and the absorption of ideas. Build a foundation of trust first. Before people decide what they think of your message, they decide what they think of you. Once you establish your warmth, your strength is a welcome reassurance. Connect first, and your leadership becomes a gift and not a threat. So that is my message to anyone who has the joy or privilege of being a leader, is connect, then lead, be kind. I've got 2 more little tips on leadership from Roy Lilly. I love Roy Lilly. Did anybody read Roy Lilly? He has 2 tips which I absolutely love. One is, and I've done this so many times, recruit people who are better than you. Absolutely do that. Get people in your team who are better than you. It makes your life so much easier. And he always says, give good people the time and space to do great things, which is about not micromanaging and looking after your team and colleagues. So those are my, how are we doing? 3 minutes. 7 lessons from my career. I hope some of you, particularly those of you who are perhaps still early on in your careers, will find some of them of value. They're only my insights. It's been almost 30 years. I'm not dead yet. See if you can spot yourself in any of these pictures, and otherwise, thank you very much for listening, and that's me done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neil. This COTTRELL lecture is always delivered by somebody that's made such a huge contribution to IPC, and you've just honoured that wonderfully, Neil. Just thank you so much for that inspiration. We now have a programme which splits into a couple of different rooms. So you've got 5 minutes to check your programme to see where you'd like to be next. Our next session will start at 9:50. So you've just got a few minutes to work out where you want to be.